Rain fell in unbroken sheets across the underlevels of Rither 7, hissing as it slid through cracked pipes and gathered in neon-slick puddles. The towers above shone like clean blades of glass and chrome, untouched by the stench below, but down here the air was heavy with rust, sewage, and desperation. Every alley was a cage of shadows where people disappeared without anyone asking why. Serial pressed herself against the damp wall, the remnants of her ceremonial gown clinging to her blue skin. Once the fabric had glimmered at family gatherings, its embroidery a mark of her bloodline. Now it hung in tatters, strips fluttering in the chill wind, plastered against her thin frame. Her bare feet slipped on the slick pavement as she moved, ribs aching with each breath. Hunger gnawed sharp and constant, twisting her thoughts until all that remained was the ache inside her chest and the desperate need to fill it. She had avoided gangs, sidestepped men whose eyes lingered too long on her body, kept herself out of reach of those who prowled the underlevels like scavengers. Pride alone had kept her moving, pride and the furious refusal to die faceless in a gutter. But pride didn't silence the hollow in her stomach, and tonight that hollow was a predator. The glint of pale flesh caught her eye's iron fat, discarded near an overturned crate, slick with rain and grime. It didn't matter. She lunged, fingers clawing through the puddle, closing around the scrap like a treasure. The meat was hers. She wouldn't let it go. A snarl split the dark. The sound froze her blood a second before pain tore into her arm. A feral dog burst from the shadows, ribs jutting beneath mangy fur, eyes wild with starvation. Its teeth sank into her forearm, the force of the bite jolting through her bones. She hissed and struck, nails raking the muzzle, but the animal only growled and clamped harder, dragging her gown into a puddle that stank of oil and decay. Her fist clung to the scrap, knuckles white. If she lost it, she might not last another day. She kicked, clawed, screamed, but her strength faltered. The dog pressed her into the ground, hot breath rank against her face, snapping jaws edging closer to her throat. Fear locked her chest. Not soldiers, not plague, not debt collectors. This would be her end. Torn apart by a starving beast no one would remember. Then a shadow fell across her. A boot slammed down beside her head. A hand, strong and unyielding, gripped the dog by the scruff and yanked it upward with the precision of trained control. The animal twisted midair, snarling, teeth flashing. The man didn't curse or shout. His voice cut low and steady through the rain. Enough, the dog writhed, jaws snapping until the man tore open a ration strip from his jacket and flung it across the alley. The scent hit the animal instantly. It dropped to the ground, bolted after the food, and vanished into the dark. Serial gasped, her wounded arm trembling, the strip of meat still clenched in her fist. She expected another hand to rip it from her, expected cruelty or demand, but instead the stranger crouched beside her. His face came into the flickering neon. Early 30s, short dark hair plastered by the rain, stubble rough across a jaw set in calm lines. His jacket was patched at the shoulders, his boots shined from habit, posture sharp in a way that spoke of years taking orders and giving them. "You're bleeding," he said. She pressed her hand to her arm, voice rasping. "I don't need help." "You do." His tone left no space for argument. He pulled a compact field kit from his pocket, tore a strip of cloth clean, and spoke again. "Hold still." Exhaustion won over pride. She let him bind the wound, his hands firm but careful, the smell of antiseptic burning her nose. She flinched not from pain, but from the shock of being touched without cruelty. When he finished, he set a steaming ration pack in her lap. "Eat." Her pride fought her hunger, but hunger won. She ate in small, shaking bites while he turned his head, granting her the illusion of privacy. When she finished, the empty pack felt like shame in her hands. "Why?" she asked hoarsely. "Because you are about to lose," he answered simply. His eyes, steady and unpitying, met hers. "My name is Seth Ross," he said. "Freight handler at the docks. Used to be Scout Corps. Long time back." She hesitated, the name she had nearly forgotten tightening in her throat. Serial. Her name felt strange in her mouth, as though saying it made her visible again. Rain pattered softer now, mist rising from the gutters. He rose, offered an arm, not a hand, not a grip, just enough for balance. She took it because she had no choice. They walked into the wet light together, the echo of the dog's snarl still clinging to her ears. Seth's eyes scanned corners and rooftops with soldier's caution, but his presence was steady, unshakable. For the first time in weeks, Serial felt something other than hunger or fear. She felt seen. And that frightened her more than the dog ever had. The clinic reeked of disinfectant and damp clothing. Metal benches lined the narrow waiting hall, every seat occupied by the weary and the sick. People sat hunched, coughing quietly, their eyes fixed on the floor as if looking up might invite trouble. Serial pressed her back against the cold wall, clutching the shawl Seth had draped over her shoulders. The bandage on her arm was already darkened with rain and blood, but she refused to shift, refused to look weak among strangers. Seth stood a step away, arms crossed, leaning against the wall with the kind of stillness that came from long habit. He didn't speak to her, didn't push for gratitude or questions. He simply stayed. That, more than anything, unsettled her. Men always wanted something coin, body, obedience. This one only gave her space, and the silence pressed heavier than words. When the medic finally called her in, she rose stiffly. Seth moved with her, not asking permission, slipping through the doorway and remaining just inside as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Serial nearly snapped at him, but the words caught in her throat when the medic pulled her sleeve up and hissed at the wound. "You did a clean job on the first wrap," the medic said flatly, not looking at her, but at Seth. His hands were already busy cleaning the cut, rinsing away grime with cold antiseptic that stung worse than the dog's bite. "Old Corps training," Seth replied with a small nod. The medic grunted, neither praise nor insult, then threaded the needle and pulled the gash closed with quick, sure stitches. Serial clenched her jaw, refusing to cry out. She had been hurt worse before. She wouldn't show weakness now, not in front of a stranger who had pulled her out of the gutter. When the medic tied the final knot and left them with a roll of tape and a bottle of antiseptic, Serial slid off the table, her bare feet touching the cold floor. She steadied herself against the wall, her pride cracking under the weight of hunger, pain, and exhaustion. Seth stepped forward, lifting her torn shawl and wrapping it carefully around her shoulders again. His voice was calm, practical. "This will hold until you find something better." There was no pity in his tone, no softness, just quiet certainty, as though this act of care was routine, no different than tying his boots. That disarmed her more than tenderness could have. They stepped back into the night together. The rain had eased into drizzle, neon signs casting red, green, and purple across the puddles. Vendors closed their stalls, scavengers picked through bins, children darted barefoot between alleys. Life pressed on, indifferent. Serial walked close, but not too close, her jaw tight. Every few steps, she glanced at him, the way he scanned doorways and rooflines, the way his shoulders shifted like he expected trouble. Finally, she asked the question gnawing at her chest. "Why were you there? Men like you don't wander into places like this." He didn't look at her, only adjusted the strap of his satchel. "Freight shifts run late. My bunk's 2 blocks north. Easier to cut through the underlevels than the main market. So you weren't looking for me?" She pressed, suspicion sharp in her voice. "No, His answer was plain, without hesitation. I was looking to get home. The honesty stung and soothed all at once. She wanted to be furious, wanted to accuse him of hiding some agenda, but the truth was more dangerous than a lie. He hadn't been searching for her, yet he'd stopped anyway. They passed a vendor pouring steaming seed coffee into tin mugs. Seth halted, dropped a few credits, and handed one to her. She hesitated, wary, then accepted it. The heat seeped into her palms, chasing the cold from her fingers. She sipped. The taste was bitter, sharp, but better than the sour rainwater she usually swallowed to keep her stomach from turning inside out. Her voice came low, unsteady. I had a family once. They're gone now. War, debt, it doesn't matter. I ended up here. He nodded slowly, not asking for more. Then you do what you have to. And you? She asked, studying him over the rim of the mug. You talk like a man who's seen fighting. Scout course, he said. His tone carried no pride, no boast. Just fact, different life. I left it. Now I move crates. I carry what others don't want to lift. It pays enough to eat. That's all I need. She caught something in his voice weight, as if those words carried ghosts. She wondered what he had lost, or what he refused to lose again. They reached a narrow building leaning against the freight station wall. Seth paused at the entrance, the noise of card games and boots echoing from inside. This is me, he said simply. You could go your own way from here. She stared at him, caught off guard. No demand, no offer of shelter wrapped in hidden strings. Just choice. The rain hissed around them. Her arm throbbed. Her body ached with fatigue. Pride battled exhaustion. In the end, survival won. Do you have a spare corner? She asked, her voice quiet but steady. He studied her face for a moment, unreadable. Then he nodded once. Lower bunk. Door locks from your side if you want it. It wasn't kindness that rattled her. It was freedom. She followed him inside, her heart pounding, uncertain if she had stepped into safety or the beginning of something more dangerous than the streets. The dormitory smelled of metal polish, sweat, and detergent. Narrow corridors rattled with laughter, the clatter of boots, and the slap of cards on wooden tables. Seth led her through without a word, past men shouting over a dice game, past bunks where others were already sprawled in uniforms stained by dock grease. He didn't touch her, didn't glance back more than once to be sure she kept up. That, too, unsettled her. His room was small, a square cut from the larger block. 2 bunks, a table scarred by years of use, a kettle with 2 tin cups, and a trunk stacked neatly with folded shirts. Discipline clung to the air like a second skin. He gestured toward the lower bunk, the mattress bare but clean, a folded blanket waiting at the corner. You lock the door from your side if you want, he said. I won't open it. Cyril stared at the bed. The thought of lying down, of closing her eyes without fearing a boot in her ribs or a knife in the dark, shook her more than hunger. She sat gingerly, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. It smelled faintly of detergent, not rot. Seth climbed to the top bunk, boots placed neatly beneath the frame. He didn't speak again. His silence wasn't indifference. It was something steadier, as if words would only clutter what was already clear. Soon his breathing fell into a slow, even rhythm. She lay awake far longer. Every creak of pipes made her tense. Every laugh from down the hall made her flinch. Yet the weight of him above, steady and unmoving, wrapped around her like a shield. When sleep finally came, it came hard and deep. The first dreamless rest she'd had in weeks that morning arrived with the clang of crates outside and the groan of machinery starting on the docks. Cyril woke tangled in the blanket, momentarily forgetting where she was, until the hum of voices reminded her. The bunk above creaked softly. Seth dropped down with a soldier's precision, already dressed, jacket zipped, satchel slung across his shoulder. "There's food at the stalls," he said, tone calm, almost casual. "I'll bring some back at midday." "You don't have to," she muttered, clutching the blanket tighter. "I know." He adjusted the strap and left without waiting for thanks, the door shutting quietly behind him. She sat in silence. The room felt alien in its order, the trunk neatly arranged, the table wiped clean, the kettle scrubbed. Nothing wasted, nothing left to chaos. She stood slowly, exploring without touching. Her eyes lingered on a case tucked into the wall, the corner of a photograph barely visible inside. For a moment she considered opening it, but pride stopped her. The hunger gnawed again, sharper than shame. She pulled his coat from the chair and draped it over her shoulders, inhaling rain and iron. It was heavier than anything she owned, and the warmth surprised her not by midday. The door opened. Seth stepped in, carrying a paper-wrapped parcel. He sat at the table, unwrapped it. 2 slices of Ziran loaf, a boiled egg, dried thorn fruit. He pushed half toward her, keeping the other half for himself. "Eat." She hesitated, waiting for the catch. When none came, she took the bread, eating slowly, each bite a battle between pride and need. "Why?" she asked at last, voice tight. "Why are you doing this?" He chewed, swallowed, eyes steady. "Because I was there, and you were on the ground. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." Silence hung between them, heavy and sharp. She ate anyway, the bitter thorn fruit cutting her tongue but filling her stomach. He drank water from a chipped cup, posture relaxed but eyes still scanning her, the same way he scanned corners and doorways. When the meal ended, she set her hands flat on the table, her voice low but defiant. "If I stay another night, I won't just take. I'll help with something." He gave a single nod. "There's laundry, floors, nothing glamorous. Do what you want." The deal was sealed without handshake, without smile. Just a mutual understanding out that evening, while the dorm echoed with laughter and snoring from men outside their door. Cyril swept the floor with a rag tied to a stick, wiped the table, scrubbed the kettle until it gleamed. Sweat clung to her hairline, her stitched arm throbbing, but she pressed on. When she finally stopped, chest heaving, Seth glanced from his bunk, expression unreadable. "No one asked you to do that," he said. "I won't sit here like a guest," she shot back. "If I stay, I earn it. Fair." His tone held no mockery, no approval. Just fact. She sat on the bunk, pulling the blanket tight around her shoulders, watching him as the silence grew heavier. Pride, hunger, and something sharper warred in her chest. At last she said the words she'd been circling since the night in the alley. "You haven't tried anything." He raised a brow. "Should I have?" "Most men would." Her tone was blunt, almost daring. "I'm not most men." Her eyes narrowed. "So you don't want me?" His jaw tightened, the muscles in his face hard with restraint. "That's not what I said." The air thickened between them, her heart beating hard against her ribs. For the first time since meeting him, she didn't know whether to fear his answer or hope for it. The rain outside drummed softly against the walls, a steady rhythm that filled the silence between them. Cyril sat on the lower bunk, blanket wrapped around her shoulders, her crimson hair falling forward like a veil. Seth remained at the table, his arms crossed loosely, gaze steady but unreadable. "You don't want me," she repeated, her voice quieter now, as though testing the words against the air. He shifted, leaning forward, elbows braced on his knees. His tone was even, but beneath it lay something taut, pulled tight. "I want you, Cyril. I wanted you from the alley. Every time I look at you, I have to hold the line. But I won't be the next man who takes what you can't refuse. Her chest tightened. She had expected hunger, had braced herself for demand. But restraint? Restraint cracked something sharper inside her, because it forced her to confront a truth she wasn't ready for. He saw her as more than a body to be used. That frightened her more than cruelty ever could. "You think I'm weak," she muttered, defiance laced in every syllable. "No." His voice cut through the air with quiet firmness. "I think you're still standing after everything. That's not weakness." The words hit her like a blow. She turned away quickly, brushing her hair back with trembling fingers. The rain's hiss filled the pause, and in that pause she felt the heat of his presence. Steady as a wall behind her, Seth stood slowly, the scrape of the chair legs low against the floor. He didn't move closer right away, only stopped behind her shoulder. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, controlled, dangerous in its honesty. "Don't mistake patience for disinterest. I want you, but I'd rather wait than see that look of doubt in your eyes again." Her breath caught, pulse hammering in her throat. She turned her head, just enough to see him in her periphery. His jaw was tight, every muscle in his body held in check. The restraint was palpable. For a long moment neither moved. Then, slowly, deliberately, she stood, letting the blanket slip from her shoulders. She faced him fully now, bare feet planted firm on the cold floor. The distance between them was barely an arm's length, yet it felt like a chasm she had to choose to cross. Her hand lifted, fingers trembling as she placed her palm flat against his chest. She felt the thud of his heartbeat under her skin, hard and steady. He didn't move, didn't seize the moment. He let her choose. Serial leaned in, her voice just above a whisper. Then maybe stop waiting. The line he had held so tightly snapped. His hands found her waist, strong but not crushing, pulling her against him. Their mouths met in a kiss that was rougher than she expected, the hunger spilling through the cracks of his control. She clung to him, nails catching in the fabric of his jacket, matching his urgency with her own. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. His voice came ragged, pulled from somewhere deep. "If we keep going now, I won't stop." Her amber eyes searched his, wide but unflinching. For a heartbeat, she almost said the words that would tip them over the edge. Instead, she pulled back just slightly, her lips brushing his as she whispered, "Not tonight." His jaw flexed, restraint snapping back into place with visible effort. He nodded once, stepping back, pacing to the far side of the room as if he needed distance to keep himself in check. Serial sat back down on the bunk, chest rising and falling too fast, her body alive in a way it hadn't been in months. She wrapped the blanket around her again, but the warmth now came from inside her, above the hiss of rain and the muffled laughter from the corridor. She whispered into the quiet, not sure if he was even listening. "You're the first man who made me feel like I still have a choice." From across the room, his voice came low and steady, anchoring her like it had from the very first moment. "Then I'm doing it right." She lay down, her head sinking into the thin pillow, the echo of his heartbeat still in her palm. For the first time, her fear wasn't of the night itself, but of what tomorrow might bring. The next day dawned gray, the sky above the underlevels thick with exhaust that drifted down like another layer of rain. Serial woke to the faint smell of boiled root and the scrape of a chair leg. Seth sat at the table, already dressed for the docks, his satchel strap buckled, his boots laced neat as ever. He placed a small parcel on the wood. "Bread and dried fruit," he said. "Enough until midday." She pushed herself upright, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. For a moment, she simply stared at him, the lines of his shoulders, the disciplined care in every movement. He lived as if chaos didn't exist, as if order was the only thing keeping him upright. "You don't have to keep feeding." "Ami," she said. "I know." His tone was calm, unshaken. "But I will." He slung the satchel over his shoulder. "Keep the bandage clean. I'll be back by sundown." And then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. For a long while, she sat in silence, staring at the bread he'd left. Her pride whispered that she didn't need him, that she could take to the streets again and prove she wasn't weak. But her stomach ached, and the memory of cold rainwater scraped across her throat. She ate the bread slowly, chewing each bite until it turned tasteless, forcing herself to accept the truth. Survival was easier here. By midday, she forced herself out into the market. She wrapped his heavy coat around her shoulders, pulling the hood low, but her blue skin still drew glances. She ignored them, stepping between stalls of spoiled bread, baskets of thorn fruit gone soft, nets of larkfoil dripping rainwater. Vendors sneered when she asked for work. One laughed outright. Another offered half the pay he'd give a child. She swallowed the sharp reply, burning her tongue, and walked on at last. A woman mending nets near the docks looked up, eyes catching on the stitches in Cyriel's arm. "Can you use both hands?" Cyriel lifted her chin. "Yes, then sit. Pick the bad fibers. Tie the good. Pay is bread and tokens." Cyriel sat on the damp crate, fingers clumsy at first, then quicker as hours passed. Her hands cramped, her back ached, but she didn't stop. When the woman returned, she placed a small roll of bread and 3 tokens into Cyriel's palm. "Come back tomorrow if you want." Cyriel carried the bread as if it were gold. For the first time in weeks, she had earned something herself. When she returned to the dorm, Seth wasn't back yet. She placed the bread carefully on the table, then sat with her back straight, waiting. Her chest felt steadier than it had in days. It was nearly dark when the door opened. Seth stepped inside, shoulders heavy from labor, boots caked with dock grime. His eyes landed immediately on the bread. His brow lifted slightly. "Yours?" "Yes." She straightened further, her voice firm. "I worked nets. I don't need to take only from you." He set his satchel down, moved closer, and rested a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Good." His voice was simple, but his eyes carried something warmer, pride without condescension. She wanted to snap at him for sounding like a teacher, but the words stuck. His approval felt real, unforced, and it softened her despite herself. That night, they shared stew he had carried back and bread she had earned. The steam fogged the small mirror. Their voices overlapped when the kettle sputtered, and for the first time she laughed short, sharp, but real. Seth's mouth curved into the faintest smile, and the room felt less like a shelter and more like a place lived in. Later, she sat at the mirror, combing through her crimson hair with slow, deliberate strokes. Seth leaned against the wall, watching without realizing until she caught his reflection. Their eyes met in the glass. She set the comb down, turned toward him, and crossed the small room. She stopped when her knees brushed his, her breath shallow, but her voice steady. "I'm not a guest anymore. I earned my own food today. If I stay tonight, it's not because I have nowhere else. It's because I want to." He didn't move. Didn't reach for her. He waited. She leaned in first, closing the distance. Their lips met, firmer than the night before, heat pressing through the restraint. His hand came up, cupping the back of her neck, pulling her closer. The kiss deepened, slow and heavy, their breaths uneven. When they broke apart, her forehead rested against his. For the first time since the alley, her chest wasn't hollow. Her choice had filled it. "I thought you'd take what you wanted on the first night," she whispered. "I wanted to," he admitted, voice low, roughened. "But I'd rather you give it than have me steal it." Her heart clenched, the weight of his words hitting harder than hunger ever had. She kissed him again, slower this time, the kind of kiss that promised tomorrow, and for once, tomorrow didn't terrify her. It pulled her closer, The days began to fold into one another, but not with the same bleak sameness Cereal had once known on the streets. Now there was rhythm. She woke to the sound of Seth moving above her, his boots lacing with soldier's precision, the scrape of a chair as he left a parcel of food on the table before heading to the docks. She returned each evening with sore hands and shoulders from tying netting or scrubbing hands at the canteen. And when the door shut behind him at night, it was no longer silence that greeted her, but warmth. The dorm became theirs in small ways. She swept the floor, washed the cups, folded the blanket neatly each morning. He came back with stew or bread, sometimes coffee when credits stretched far enough. They ate together at the scarred table, steam rising between them, laughter slipping through in hesitant bursts. One night the kettle sputtered so violently it nearly tipped, and the short bark of laughter that broke from Cereal startled them both. She covered her mouth, embarrassed, but Seth only smiled faintly, as if he'd been waiting for that sound all along. Their closeness deepened like water seeping into stone. She no longer flinched when his arm brushed hers as he set food down. He no longer forced himself to look away when she combed out her crimson hair by the mirror. They found themselves leaning together without thought, her head against his shoulder as they talked in low voices, his hand steadying her bandage while she tied the ends. It wasn't sudden. It was built, brick by brick, with patience and choice. One evening, as the rain hissed against the pipes outside, Seth came in later than usual, his shoulders stiff with fatigue. He washed his arms at the basin while Cereal unpacked the bread she'd earned that day. They set it on the table beside the stew he had carried. For once, the food was theirs in equal measure. They ate in quiet contentment until Cereal set her spoon down and studied him across the table. His face was shadowed in the dim light, but the tension in his jaw was clear. "You live like this every day?" she asked softly. "Alone, routine. No one waiting for you?" He glanced up, spoon paused mid-her. "Yes, and that doesn't bother you?" "It used to. Not anymore." He leaned back, his voice steady but low. "People I trusted didn't make it. Easier to stop expecting anyone to stay. The honesty hit harder than pity ever could." She lowered her gaze, her own voice rough. "I stayed today. I didn't run. I noticed." Silence stretched between them, not cold but waggy. She pushed back from the table, moved to the mirror, and began combing her hair with slow strokes. Seth leaned against the wall, watching despite himself. When her amber eyes caught his in the reflection, she didn't look away. "You stare," she said quietly, "but you don't act, because I'm giving you space." She set the comb down, turned to face him, and crossed the small room with deliberate steps. She stopped in front of him, close enough that her knees brushed his legs, her voice low but steady though her chest rose and fell too fast. "What if I don't want space right now?" Seth didn't move for a heartbeat. Then his hand lifted, rough palm finding her cheek, thumb brushing the line of her jaw. He leaned in slowly, deliberately, giving her every chance to pull back. She didn't. Their mouths met, not tentative this time, but sure, hungry. Her fingers threaded into his short hair, his arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer until no space remained. When they broke apart, foreheads resting together, her voice came like a confession. "I thought I'd lost myself out there. But you," she swallowed hard, her throat tight, "you make me feel like I still matter." His hand slid from her cheek to the back of her neck, steady, grounding. "You do," he said simply. "To me, you do." That night they lay tangled on the same bunk, bodies warm beneath the thin blanket, her head resting against his chest. His arm held her tight, his breathing slow and even. For the first time, Cereal didn't dream of running or hunger or cold. She dreamed of the rhythm they were building, fragile but real. And when dawn came, streaking pale light across the grime-stained window. She woke not with dread, but with the quiet, startling certainty that she no longer feared tomorrow. The rain hadn't stopped in days. It slithered down cracked windows, hissed through rusted pipes, and pooled in the gutters until the underlevels stank of rot. But inside the dorm, the air was warmer now, touched by the faint scent of boiled root and damp clothes drying near the heater. Serial sat on the lower bunk, comb in hand, dragging it slowly through her crimson hair. The strands gleamed faintly in the dim light, no longer tangled, no longer dulled by neglect. Seth sat at the table, stripping grease from a small knife with a rag, his movements as precise as everything he did. The room had settled into a rhythm, 2 meals shared a day, bread sometimes earned, sometimes brought, laundry folded in neat piles, quiet conversation that had become less about survival and more about presence. But the fragile comfort cracked when Serial's eyes drifted to the wall where Seth's trunk sat open. Inside, tucked into the corner, lay a small case she hadn't noticed before. Curiosity pulled at her. When Seth stepped out briefly to fetch water, she moved closer, her bare feet silent against the floor. She opened the case. 2 items rested inside, a rusted dog tag and a faded photo. The dog tag was stamped with numbers, scratched but still legible, the insignia of the Scout Corps etched faintly at the edge. She lifted the photo. A squad of young men stood shoulder to shoulder, uniforms clean, eyes unbroken. And there, at the edge, Seth years younger, posture already sharp, jaw set in grim determination, her breath hitched. She knew that insignia. She had seen it on soldiers who once marched through her family's district, collecting debt with rifles, leaving blood and smoke in their wake. It was the Corps that had broken her family apart, that had stripped her of the silk gowns and set her adrift in these underlevels. And now, she had been sleeping in the bunk of one of their own. When the door clicked open, she spun, clutching the photo. Seth stopped, water tin in hand. His eyes flicked to the photo, then to her face. He didn't speak right away. He only set the tin down and leaned against the doorframe, shoulders heavy, as if he had been waiting for this moment. "You were Corps," she said, her voice sharp, shaking. "Yes." His tone carried no denial, no excuse. Just fact. Her fingers curled around the edge of the photo until it bent. "They ruined everything. My family. My home. And you," her voice broke, pride warring with grief. "You were one of them." "I was," he said quietly. He stepped forward, slow, steady, not reaching for her. "I followed orders I shouldn't have. I stayed longer than I should have. Too many bodies. Too many debts that weren't ours to collect. So I walked away." Her chest burned. She wanted to throw the photo at him, to spit, to tear down the fragile shelter they had built. But when she looked into his eyes, she didn't see pride or denial. She saw the same quiet discipline he carried in everything, and behind it, regret heavy enough to bend iron. "You saved me," she whispered, voice raw. "The same way your kind destroyed me. I'm not Corps anymore," he said. His jaw tightened, his voice low and steady. "I left because I couldn't be part of what they did. And I won't ever be again." For a long time, neither moved. The rain pounded harder against the glass, the pipes groaning like the city itself was listening. Serial's hand trembled around the photo, then slowly lowered it back into the case. She shut it, the click sharp in the silence. Her eyes lifted to his, wet with more than rain. "You could have walked past me that night. I know." He took a step closer. "But I didn't." The weight of it broke her anger's edge. She sank onto the bunk, shoulders shaking, not from weakness, but from the force of holding herself upright too long. Seth crouched in front of her, not touching, only close enough that she could feel the heat of him. "You don't owe me forgiveness," he said, "but I'll keep showing you I'm not the man who tore your world apart. I'll keep choosing different." Her pride flared, then crumbled under the quiet of his words. She lifted her chin, eyes burning into his. "Then don't stop." He reached out, slow, careful, and when her hand rose to meet his, the grip was fierce, trembling, a live dot outside. The rain hammered against the underlevels, washing rust and rot down into the gutters. Inside, the two of them sat close, a dog tag and a photo tucked away, their truth laid bare. Survival had brought them together. Pain had cracked them open. And now, in the ruins, they chose each other anyway. For the first time, Serial believed the words she had once feared most, that tomorrow would come, and she would not face it alone.